Hi, Nathan. I hope you're doing well. This is going to be a very long email, and I'm sorry for that. But I want to get my story out there. I'm a firefighter from Los Angeles, California, and I've served for 15 years. Over the years, I've witnessed my fair share of destruction, pain, and resilience. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the bizarre events I encountered while responding to the wildfires that ravaged the Altadena neighborhood in Los Angeles, California. I share this story anonymously, not out of fear, but because it's deeply personal. You can call me Alex, though. My wife and I already have differing views on topics like these. She's a Baptist, steadfast in her beliefs, and dismissive of conspiracies. I, however, keep an open mind. This isn't just a story about battling fires. It's about confronting the unknown, witnessing the inexplicable, and trying to make sense of a world that seems to blur the lines between the natural and the supernatural. For those of you watching this, I hope you'll help me make sense of what I experienced. My encounter with the orbs of light. It was late in the afternoon when we arrived at the Altadena neighborhood. The air was thick with smoke, and the heat radiating from the flames felt like a living, breathing entity trying to consume everything in its path. My fellow firefighters and I moved house to house, doing everything we could to protect lives and property. The scene at the Altadena area around 7 p.m. that evening was surreal, a convergence of destruction and desperation. It was like being a part of an apocalyptic movie. It felt surreal and desperate. Fire danced across the ridges like a living beast, consuming everything in its path. Smoke rolled across the sky, blotting out the stars from view, and ash fell like snow, coating everything in a fine gray film. As firefighters, we were trained to focus on the task at hand, to keep emotions in check, but the magnitude of the blaze tested even the most seasoned among us. I was praying silently as I was moving around from house to house. I saw dogs, cats, rabbits, and other small animals panicking and running around, and it honestly broke my heart all the more. I was exhausted but determined, moving quickly between houses alongside my team, dousing flames that leapt from dry brush to rooftops in mere seconds. The embers were flying over us and all around us, and for a moment they looked beautiful to me. But I soon realized that these embers were once a part of someone else's house, or someone else's precious belongings, or an old tree that had been around the area for more than 80 to 100 years. I was deeply sentimental for God knows how many times during that night. The heat from the fires was oppressive, the air thick with the acrid stench of burning wood and plastic. Amid this chaos, something caught my eye in the smoky, orange-hued sky. At first, I thought it was the reflection of the flames, just an illusion created by the inferno's intensity. But as I looked closer, I realized these were not reflections. They were orbs. Small orbs of light floated above us, darting around like fireflies. At first, I thought it might be some kind of drone deployed by the authorities to monitor the fires. But as I looked closer, these lights didn't move like drones. They were too fluid, too organic in their movements. They were spherical and glowed softly, a mix of warm gold and faint blue. They reminded me of the kind of light you might see through a stained glass window, illuminated by the sun. Yet there was no sunlight here, only fire and smoke. I stood still for a moment, mesmerized by the orbs. There were about 4 or 5 of them, darting through the smoky haze as though they were alive. Their movements were deliberate, almost inquisitive. One of the orbs descended, hovering about 50 feet above me. Yes, that's right. One orb hovered directly above me, pulsating like a heartbeat. It seemed almost aware of my presence, as if it were observing me. I nudged one of my fellow firefighters and pointed toward the sky. "Hey, you see that?" I asked. "What?" he replied, squinting into the smoky haze. I realized he couldn't see them. I pointed to the sky, but he just shook his head and returned to his task. I realized then that the orbs were visible only to me. The thought unsettled me. Was I hallucinating? Was this some strange effect of the heat or the exhaustion? But these lights were too real, too vivid. They moved in ways that suggested intelligence, as though they were aware of my presence. One orb in particular seemed to focus on me, its glow intensifying slightly as it hovered closer. It brought to mind Psalm chapter 34, verse 7, "The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him, and he delivers them." Were these lights angelic? Were they sent by God to watch over us in this perilous moment? Yet again I asked myself, was I imagining it? No, I was sure of what I saw. The orbs lingered for a while, then disappeared into the smoky abyss. My heart raced, but I didn't have time to dwell on it. We had a job to do. As the minutes stretched into hours, the orbs didn't leave. They followed us, always staying just within sight. They seemed to move with purpose, gliding over the burning landscape as though surveying the destruction. At one point, I noticed one of the orbs hovering near a particularly intense fire. It stayed there for a few moments, then moved rapidly toward a nearby house, circling it 3 times before retreating back into the sky. Moments later, the house collapsed, consumed by flames. I couldn't shake the feeling that the orbs were watching, recording, or perhaps even influencing the events unfolding around us. Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 14 came to my mind. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil. Were these lights a manifestation of divine judgment sent to bear witness to the devastation? Remember, folks, that the Holy Bible also says in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." I couldn't shake the feeling that these orbs were part of something beyond my understanding. As the fires raged on, I couldn't stop thinking about the orbs. Were they drones, as some might suggest? If so, they were unlike any technology I'd ever seen. Like I said earlier, their movements were too organic, too purposeful. Another thought crossed my mind. Were these orbs some kind of extraterrestrial presence? I'd heard stories of UFO sightings during natural disasters, but I'd never given them much thought. Yet the idea didn't seem so far-fetched now. But deep down, I felt these orbs were something spiritual. Their light didn't just illuminate the sky, it seemed to illuminate something within me, stirring thoughts of faith, judgment, and divine intervention. 2 Chronicles chapter 16 verse 9 says, "For the eyes of the Lord range throughout the earth to strengthen those whose hearts are fully committed to him." Could these orbs have been the eyes of the Lord, sent to observe and strengthen us in this moment of crisis? Later that night, around 11 p.m., we were stationed near the edge of the forest, where the fire was most intense. The crackling of flames mixed with the distant wail of sirens created an almost apocalyptic soundtrack. That's when I saw him. The mysterious man. As I trudged along a narrow road near the base of the mountains, sweat dripping down my soot-covered face, I heard a faint sound. At first, I thought it was just the wind, whistling through the burning trees, but it grew louder, a voice cutting through the chaos. "Texas will be next." I froze mid-step, turning toward the sound. The voice was strong and commanding, yet it carried an urgency that made my chest tighten. My flashlight beam cut through the smoke, illuminating a figure emerging from the edge of the burning forest. He walked toward me with steady, deliberate steps, unaffected by the heat or the flames. His white clothing was smudged with ash and dirt, and his boots crunched against the scorched ground. He was tall, maybe 6 feet, with a broad build. His hair was dark, and his thick mustache framed a face that looked both weathered and resolute. His piercing eyes locked onto mine, and I felt as though he could see straight into my soul. "Texas will be next," he repeated, his voice louder this time, carrying an authority that demanded my attention. I stepped forward cautiously, my flashlight still trained on him. "Sir, you need to get out of here. It's dangerous." He didn't flinch. His gaze remained fixed on me, unwavering. "I need you to listen," he said to me. "Texas will be next. Tell them. Warn them. They must prepare." I stared at him, struggling to process his words. The flames crackled and roared behind him, yet he seemed unbothered, almost as if the fire respected his presence. "Who are you?" I asked, trying to steady my voice. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he stepped closer, his face illuminated by the flickering light of the fire. His skin was tanned, and his eyes, dark and intense, seemed to hold centuries of wisdom. He looked like he was in his mid-40s, a mix of Mexican and Caucasian heritage. "You don't need to know who I am," he said. "You only need to heed my words. Texas will be next. Disaster is coming, and they are not ready." I glanced around, half expecting someone else to appear, but it was just the two of us. My radio crackled with distant chatter from my crew, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. Something about this man felt otherworldly. "Why Texas?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. He tilted his head, studying me as if deciding how much to reveal. "Because the sins of the people are piling up. Their arrogance, their greed, their neglect of the Lord, judgment is at hand. His words struck a nerve, and I felt a chill run down my spine despite the oppressive heat of the flames. Proverbs chapter 16 verse 18 flashed through my mind. Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. Listen, I said, trying to regain control of the situation. If you're trying to make a point, now's not the time. We're in the middle of a wildfire. He took another step closer, and for a moment, the chaos around us seemed to fade. The crackling fire, the shouts of my team, even the acrid smell of smoke, all of it dimmed as his presence consumed my senses. This fire, he said, gesturing to the inferno behind him, is only the beginning. More fires are coming, fires of judgment, fires that will test the hearts of men. Will they turn back to the Lord, or will they perish in their rebellion? Who sent you? I demanded, my heart pounding. Are you with law enforcement? A reporter? What are you doing here? His lips curved into a faint, almost sorrowful smile. I am sent by one who sees all, who knows all, the one who holds the breath of life in his hands. I opened my mouth to respond, but he continued, his voice growing in intensity. The Lord is patient, but his patience has limits. Tell them to repent. Tell them to turn from their wickedness before it's too late. His words echoed with such authority that I felt an overwhelming urge to drop to my knees, but I resisted. My mind raced with questions, yet my body felt frozen in place. Ezekiel chapter 33 verse 6 came to mind. But if the watchman sees the sword coming, and does not blow the trumpet to warn the people, and the sword comes and takes someone's life, that person's life will be taken because of their sin, but I will hold the watchman accountable for their blood. I turned my head briefly, scanning for anyone who might back me up, but when I looked back, the man was gone. Literally gone. I turned away for just a moment, maybe 3 seconds at most, to call out to one of my team, but when I turned back, the man was gone. My heart sank, and a wave of unease washed over me. I shone my flashlight into the forest, calling out, "Sir, where did you go?" There was no answer, only the roar of the flames and the distant sound of my team shouting orders. I ran toward the spot where he had stood, but there was no trace of him, not even footprints in the ash-covered ground. I felt a strange mixture of fear and awe. Who was he? An angel, a prophet, or something else entirely? His words replayed in my mind over and over. Texas will be next. I later asked my team if anyone had seen a man matching his description. No one had. Was he a messenger? An angel? Hebrews chapter 13 verse 2 reminds us, "Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by so doing, some people have shown hospitality to angels without knowing it." To this day, I wonder if that's who he was. Was he an angel sent to deliver a warning? His appearance and disappearance defied logic, and his words carried a weight that I couldn't ignore. When I got home before dawn, I told my wife about my encounter, but she told me that it might have just been a stranger with a mental illness. I felt angry, sad, and frustrated. I knew I could not get any sound discussion with her because her mind was already closed. This is another reason why I emailed you my experience, and I really want your channel to share my experience. I love what you do. Anyways, off to my third strange experience. My third bizarre experience did not only happen to me, but to the rest of my friends and brothers who responded to the fires. As we moved through the neighborhoods, assessing the damage and extinguishing fires, I began to hear a strange sound. Amidst the chaos, the roaring flames, the screaming sirens, the shouts of people, I suddenly heard it, a deep, resonating vibration that seemed to pulse in the very air around us. I stopped in my tracks, holding up a hand to signal my crew to pause. "Do you guys hear that?" I asked, scanning their faces for a reaction. "Hear what?" shouted Jake, one of the newer guys on the team, as he doused the flames engulfing a garage door. "Listen," I urged, pointing to my ears. The vibrations seemed to grow stronger, reverberating through my body. It wasn't just a sound, it was a sensation, like standing too close to a subwoofer at a concert. It wasn't a normal sound, I could tell you that. It felt more like a frequency, something you could almost feel in your chest. The vibrations seemed to pulse through the air, as if some invisible force was at work. One by one, the others began to notice. "Okay, that's weird," said Brian, our captain, lowering his hose. "What is that?" "It's like the ground is humming," added Mia, our paramedic, looking slightly worried. "It's not the ground," I said, shaking my head. It's coming from everywhere. The air, the buildings, everything. We all stood there for a moment, caught in a strange silence despite the chaos surrounding us. The vibrations were unlike anything I'd ever experienced. They were deep, rhythmic, and seemed to carry an unexplainable energy. Could it be the fire, like some kind of acoustic effect? Mia suggested. Maybe, I said, though I didn't believe it. I'd fought fires for 15 years, and I'd never heard or felt anything like this. I looked around, trying to locate the source, but it was impossible. Some have speculated about directed energy weapons or advanced technology being used in situations like these. I don't know what to believe, but what I heard was real, definitely real. It reminded me of Psalm chapter 29, verse 4. The voice of the Lord is powerful. The voice of the Lord is full of majesty. Was it God's voice shaking the earth or something else entirely? We regrouped near the fire truck, taking a moment to hydrate and assess the situation. The vibrations persisted, almost as if they were alive, weaving through the air in waves. Could it be machinery? Jake asked. Maybe construction equipment nearby? There's no construction in a wildfire zone, Brian replied. And even if there was, it wouldn't feel like this. I pulled out my handheld radio, switching to the general frequency. Command, this is Engine 22. We're picking up some strange vibrations in the area. Do you have any reports of unusual activity or equipment nearby? After a pause, a voice crackled back. Negative, 22. Could be related to the fire. Stand by. I sighed, lowering the radio. Well, that's helpful. Could it be helicopters? Mia asked. Helicopters make noise, Brian countered. This feels different. It's not sound. It's like it's in your bones. As we debated, the vibrations grew stronger. Tools rattled in the truck. The ground seemed to tremble slightly, though no one else reported an earthquake. I walked a few paces away from the group, holding out my arms as if I could somehow feel the source of the phenomenon. My mind raced with possibilities. Seismic activity, atmospheric pressure, even some kind of experimental technology. Maybe it's a natural phenomenon, I muttered to myself, though I wasn't convinced. What did you say? Mia asked, walking over. I said maybe it's natural, I replied. But honestly, I've got no clue. Maybe it's not natural, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Her words hung in the air, and for a moment I considered the possibility. Could this be something supernatural? My rational mind fought against the idea, but I couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in my gut. Could this be the voice of God in some form? A warning, perhaps? The thought both comforted and unsettled me. Mia, you're a churchgoer, right? I asked, turning to her. Yeah, she said cautiously. Does this remind you of anything from Scripture? She frowned, thinking for a moment. Well, there are stories in the Bible about God speaking through natural events. Thunder, earthquakes, wind. Maybe this is one of those moments. Jake, ever the skeptic, rolled his eyes. Come on, guys. It's got to be something scientific. Maybe the fire's creating pressure waves or something. Then why haven't we felt this at any other fire? Brian shot back. We've seen bigger blazes than this. Look, I said, trying to keep the team focused. It doesn't matter what it is right now. We still have a job to do. But even as I spoke, the vibrations became impossible to ignore. My hands shook slightly as I tried to grip the hose, and my head buzzed with a dull ache. As the vibrations peaked, I suddenly felt an overwhelming sense of presence, as if something or someone was watching us. I looked around, my eyes scanning the smoke-filled horizon. Do you feel that? I asked quietly. Feel what? Brian replied. Like we're not alone, I said, my voice barely audible. Mia nodded, her eyes wide. Yeah, I feel it too. The group fell silent, each of us caught in our own thoughts. The fire raged on, but for a brief moment it felt like the world had stopped. I contemplated deeply, thinking about the orbs and now the vibrations. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the memory of the vibrations. They felt like a message, a call to pay attention. I thought of Job chapter 37, verse 5. God's voice thunders in marvelous ways. He does great things beyond our understanding. Had we witnessed something divine that night? Or was it something darker, a sign of the spiritual warfare that rages unseen? Now, I want to share with you the fourth and the most unnerving experience I ever had that night. Thinking about it still gives me the chills. The The clock on my wrist read 3:27 a.m. when the scene unfolded, a time when the world feels most still and yet most vulnerable. We were exhausted from hours of battling flames, the smoke weighing heavy in our lungs and the ash clinging to our sweat-soaked gear. The fires had reduced most of the neighborhood to a smoldering wasteland, but we continued to move block by block, ensuring no embers reignited and checking for anyone in need of rescue. I was in the middle of briefing my team near the fire truck when I first saw them. At the far end of the street, 4 figures emerged from the smoky haze. They walked in perfect unison, their movements almost mechanical. The eerie synchronization sent a chill down my spine. It looked like a scene out of a horror sci-fi movie. "Hey, do you see that?" I asked, pointing toward the group. Brian, our captain, squinted through the smoke. "Yeah, I see them. What the hell are they doing?" The figures were dressed in all black, their hooded jackets concealing most of their faces. Even from a distance, I could see something unnatural in the way they carried themselves, calm, deliberate, as if they were unaffected by the chaos surrounding them. We were moving through another apartment in Altadena, where the fire had torn through with unrelenting fury. The streets were chaos, people running, screaming, trying to save what little they could. Amidst the pandemonium, I saw these 4 heroes, or perhaps villains, unnerving figures dressed in black, walking calmly down the middle of the street. They wore hooded jackets, their faces literally hidden in the shadows. They moved in perfect synchronization, chanting something I couldn't understand. The sight was 100% chilling, like a scene from The Purge. While everyone else was panicking, these individuals seemed eerily composed, almost as if they were in a trance. Their presence felt wrong, unnatural. As they drew closer, I could make out more details. The tallest of the 4 walked in the lead, a man with a gaunt face and piercing eyes that seemed to glow faintly in the firelight. His skin was pale, almost corpse-like, and his lips moved rapidly as he chanted something under his breath. Behind him were 2 women, both wearing long, flowing black robes beneath their jackets. Their hoods cast deep shadows over their faces, but I caught glimpses of their eyes, cold, unblinking, and filled with an unnatural intensity. One of them clutched a small book, its cover adorned with strange, glowing symbols. The last figure was a shorter man, stocky and broad-shouldered, carrying what looked like a staff or a rod etched with unrecognizable runes. His hood fell back slightly as he walked, revealing a head shaven, completely bald, with intricate tattooed patterns etched into his scalp. They chanted in low, guttural tones, their voices blending into a sinister harmony. I couldn't make out the words, but the sound alone was enough to make my skin crawl. "What the hell are they doing?" Mia asked, gripping the edge of the fire truck for support. "Looks like some kind of cult," Jake said, his voice uneasy. "Why would they be out here?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly despite my effort to stay calm. "This is a fire zone. They shouldn't even be here." Brian raised his hand. "Let's approach carefully. We need to make sure they're not in danger, or causing any." We moved cautiously toward the group, the chanting growing louder with every step. The sound seemed to vibrate in the air, much like the strange hum we'd experienced earlier that night. When we were about 10 feet away, the tall man at the front of the group suddenly stopped. He raised a hand, and the others fell silent. His piercing eyes locked onto mine, and I felt an almost physical pressure, as though his gaze carried weight. "Who are you?" Brian demanded, stepping forward. "This is a restricted area. You need to leave." The man tilted his head slightly, a faint smile curling his lips. "We are where we are meant to be," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "The flames purify, and we honor their power." "What does that even mean?" Jake muttered under his breath. I stepped forward, my heart pounding in my chest. "You shouldn't be here. This is dangerous, and whatever you're doing, chanting, walking around like this, it's not helping anyone." The man's smile widened. "Not everything is meant to help," he said cryptically. Something about his demeanor filled me with a sense of righteous indignation. I clenched my fists and took a step closer. "Listen to me," I said firmly, my voice rising above the crackling flames. "You need to leave now. Whatever you think you're doing, it won't work. Jesus Christ is Lord, and his power is greater than anything you're trying to summon here." For a brief moment, the man's expression faltered. His eyes narrowed, and his smile disappeared. The 2 women behind him exchanged a glance, their chanting voices softening to a whisper. "Jesus," the man repeated, almost mockingly. You cling to your crutch of faith while the world burns. Your God will not save you from what is coming. I stepped closer, feeling a surge of courage. He already has, I said, my voice steady. Through his death and resurrection, he defeated every power of darkness. You're wasting your time. The man took a step toward me, and for a moment I thought he might attack. But instead, he simply leaned in closer, his eyes boring into mine. You speak with conviction, he said, but conviction will not protect you. Watch and see. As he spoke, the flames around us seemed to flare up, casting eerie shadows across the street. The chanting resumed, louder and more intense than before. Brian grabbed my arm. We need to get out of here, he said urgently. These people aren't right. But, I started to protest, but he cut me off. Now, Alex, he said, using my first name. We're leaving. Reluctantly, I followed him and the rest of the team back toward the fire truck, though I kept glancing over my shoulder. The 4 figures remained in the middle of the street, their chanting echoing in my ears even as we moved away. I wanted to confront them once again, but something held me back, a deep, instinctual fear. I watched as they disappeared into the night, their chanting fading into the distance. 2 Corinthians chapter 11 verse 14 came to mind. And no wonder, for Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. Were they part of some dark ritual taking advantage of the chaos? Responding to these fires was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. The orbs, the mysterious man, the vibrations, and the 4 chanting villains, they all defied explanation. I've tried to rationalize these events, but there are no easy answers. After the fires were under control, I sat down on the curb, exhausted. The orbs were gone, the mysterious man was gone, the strange vibrations had stopped, and the 4 villains were no longer in sight, but their presence lingered in my mind. I replayed the events of the day, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. I thought about the people whose homes we couldn't save, the lives uprooted by the flames. I thought about my own role as a firefighter, as someone tasked with protecting others, and I thought about the orbs once more, silent witnesses to it all. Matthew chapter 5 verse 16 came to me. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Perhaps the orbs were a reminder of that, to let my light shine even in the darkest of times. Meanwhile, my wife dismisses my story, except the orbs, because she also saw some of them during the night. But that's about it. She's always been chalking it up to stress or imagination. You know, the conspiracies I find online that I used to share with her a lot, but not anymore. Yet, Brother Nathan, I know what I saw. I know what I felt. These experiences weren't figments of my imagination. They were real. To those of you listening and watching, what do you think? Were these encounters supernatural, signs from God, or something else entirely? Matthew chapter 24 verses 6-8 says, You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of birth pains. Are these events part of the birth pains mentioned in the Bible? Is the world moving closer to something greater? I don't have all the answers, but I know what I experienced. Thank you for listening, and may God bless you all. Dear friends, we have reached the end of today's testimony. What do you think about Alex's experiences? Are they supernatural in nature, or are there any scientific explanation to his strange encounters? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, and I'll see you in our next video.